So we're building relationships online first, but most people are building those relationships through these conference platforms where you're only seeing a floating head and you are very dictated by the facilitator or the person who is hosting the event on what you can and cannot do.
Hello everyone and welcome to the CMO Stories podcast, season 2, episode 31. My name is Yuri Bilast and I'm your podcast host. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Riddhi. Riddhi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on because you are nominated as one of the 100, I think, inspirational women by Unstoppable. So it's a great list to be on. But guys, if you don't know Riddhi, let me introduce her. So Riddhi Saraf is the CEO and founder of K20 Educators. That's a design studio that builds metaverse spaces for learning. Also, she's the co-founder of the first decentralized autonomous nonprofit organization for educators by educators called At3DAO. Riddhi has served as a teacher, professor, a dean, and a director in public, private, and charter schools, both locally and internationally across K-12 and higher education. Wow, you have quite some experience in the education area, I would say, Riddhi. But tell us a bit about your journey and what led you to start K20 Educators and At3DAO.
Sure thing. So I am an educator by trade. Right out of college, I did Teach for America, which is a program that puts you into low-income and under-resourced communities to teach. And that sort of started my trajectory into education. And I was a teacher for a little while. I was a dean for a little while. I helped start a few charter schools, scaling them from 2 to 15. And then I helped start private schools around the world. And in my journey, the thing that I realized that was consistent, whether you were in charter schools, public schools, or private schools, is that teachers everywhere are doing really interesting things, but they're not sharing their best practices with each other. And that's really problematic for education because in every other industry, when there's a new best practice that emerges, it gets immediately proliferate, right? People will learn how to do things well that one person in that industry has discovered. And that will actually progress the industry quite fast, right? So think about medicine. If somebody has come up with a new suturing technique, everybody in the medicinal industry will know that, and all doctors will always do that, right? Pharmaceuticals will pick it up, all that. But in education, when there's a teacher that does something really smart in one classroom, it takes 10 to 20 years for it to actually reverberate through the entire industry. And I think that's one of the reasons why education has been stagnant for so long. We have had the same educational practices for about 100 years. And so the genesis of my two companies was basically I was trying to create a community of innovative educators. And I wanted them to have a place that was in a virtual place that they could come together, share best practices, learn from each other, innovate, ideate, and reimagine education. And from there emerged a community of educators that we house in a metaverse environment. And also I started getting deeper into Web3 and blockchain and learning the potential of that for education. And so basically our community turned into a Web3 community for educators. So that was sort of the genesis of it. My company started off as K20, and then I actually moved the entire community into a nonprofit, the DAO that you just mentioned. And then K20 became a design studio for Metaverse.
Whoa. Okay, you mentioned the metaverse. So I'm now trying to imagine how does that look like. So your community, so they're meeting each other in the metaverse. Okay, we cannot show it to people, but how can we imagine? How is it? How does it look like?
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems I think we're experiencing in the virtual environment is we are all spending so much more time online right now, right? Because of the pandemic, but generally because the internet was going to lead us this way anyway. Kids are spending a lot of time on social media, things like that. And so we're building relationships online first, but most people are building those relationships through these conference platforms where you're only seeing a floating head and you are very dictated by the facilitator or the person who is hosting the event on what you can and cannot do. They're leading you into breakout groups, or they're leading you down pathways, or they're telling you to watch this presentation, so on and so forth. So what our metaverse environment allows us to do, and so I'll paint the picture for you, everybody's an avatar, and so everyone has agency. Everyone can do what they want. They can go where they want, talk to whomever they want, and engage with what they want. Now, if we had created an environment that was linear, then we would be controlling what they do. But instead, we've created an environment that is pretty dynamic, and it has several different rooms, several different activities, several different experiences. So if an educator lands in our environment, they have 10 to 20 things to do at one time, right? And so our environment basically resembles a city. And this is sort of designed by our design studio. And the city is modeled after a sort of town square or a New York City vibe, where there's many different buildings that have different functionalities. There's a piazza in the middle where there's like a little grassy green area where people can get together, and that's where people spawn. There's a subway. There's also, there's cafe, there's a lounge, there's innovation centers, there's offices, there's classrooms. And so we use that city to host different types of events, but we also allow our members to use that city whenever they want. So for example, there's one member in our DAO that is using the city to teach a Web3 course. And so they basically have found a room that they like. They happen to like the classrooms that we had, and they invite their members, their students, to come into that classroom and teach. And while that's happening, somebody else is meeting in the lounge to, have a networking event. While that's happening, somebody else is meeting with their colleagues in the office. So there's a lot of different things happening. So imagine a city, but in a metaverse space.
Whoa. And does the technology allow that you have different meetings going on at the same time, so that you are not hearing each other's, I would say, meetings?
Yeah, that's exactly the magic of these metaverse environments. And just so you know that we are platform agnostic. We do use a particular platform, but we actually experiment with many different ones. And different platforms have different functionalities, but the ones that we usually use are the ones that allow you to have it's spatial and proximity-based engagements. So basically, if you come close to another avatar, you can start talking to them, you can see their screen, but if you walk away from them, it's just like in real life where you can't hear them anymore and you can't see them anymore. The way that breakout groups work is you can actually set the space so that a table can be its own breakout room, or a classroom can be its own breakout room, or there can be breakout rooms within breakout rooms within breakout rooms. And so we have many of those in our city, so that if somebody is in the cafe, there's zero interaction with the person who's all the way on the other side in the classroom.
Right. And are there certain limitations? So, I mean, the number of people that can attend a class, I guess.
Again, it's platform specific. So there are some platforms that allow only 20 people at a time, and there are some platforms that allow 5,000 people at a time. So we basically use different platforms based on whichever case we need. And, my company K20, our design studio, is well versed in several different platforms. And so we're able to sort of maneuver our environments pretty easily.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Actually, yesterday I organized myself, again, an event in the metaverse. I organized a few already for the Rails community. Yesterday it was for the GEM community in Spatial, in my penthouse. So we were talking and it went rather smoothly. So, but I can imagine if you are with, like, let's say 20, 30 people. Yesterday we were about 10, I think. And if everyone start talking, that's not so easy, to organize. Is that something that you have a solution for, or is that not a problem?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think you're getting to a bigger sort of problem here, which is most people are not using metaverse environments well because they don't know how to design spaces in that environment. And so this is the work that my company K20 does, which is we actually use spatial science and learning science to create experiences in the environment that allow you to have up to 500 to 1,000 people in the space at the same time, but engage in a way that actually makes sense. So, we use cognitive wayfinding, for example, to make sure that people are finding their path. we use learning science to figure out, what is the best scenario for people to learn in that environment. And then we use spatial science to design the spaces so that if we have a room, for example, where there are 500 people in the room at the same time, we make sure that there are enough spaces in that room where if people want to be together with a small group of people, they can. If they want to just listen to the larger group, they can do that. If they want to watch a live stream, they can do that. And so we've actually hosted conferences that have over 500 people in the space, and it's beautiful. It's like the more people that there are in those spaces, the more beautiful it is.
Yeah, that's really like magic. So many people that you can bring together. I imagine some people with their VR glasses coming in, others with their laptop, maybe others with their smartphone. So it feels, if you say so many people, it feels like really inclusive and accessible solution that you provide, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think again, the metaverse space right now and virtual spaces they haven't been optimized. They haven't been used to the greatest extent that they could be. And for somebody who's having a conference of 500,000 people, whatever, in a virtual space, and they're doing it on a conference-based platform or a video-based platform where everybody's just staring at each other's faces, that is a suboptimal experience. Whereas in a metaverse space, like watching people walk around and accidentally bumping into a new friend or an old friend, or being able to see somebody over there and you see there's a group of people crowded around something, I'm going to go over there and check out what that is. Or there's a video over there and that looks really interesting, so I'm going to walk over there. That sort of like spatial and agentic experience is really unparalleled. And so, yeah, the more people there are, like the exciting it is, and the more you can sort of like feel that group psychology and that group dynamic, and feel like you're actually in a real space connecting with real people.
Right. But I'm also wondering, because it's quite early for the metaverse, we know what it is, but lots of people will not know what it is. So do you see, of course, there are these obstacles that you need to onboard people into Web3, into the metaverse. I guess you also see these obstacles, and how do you look at it? How do you solve these issues?
Yeah, so first we have to differentiate between what a metaverse versus what the metaverse is. So the metaverse doesn't exist, right? The concept of the metaverse is that everything you can do in real life, you can do in a virtual environment. Every single person on the planet is able to be online at the same time. There's no technology that does that. There's no, server space that is able to handle that. So the metaverse doesn't exist yet. But a metaverse is the colloquial term we use for virtual environments. So these virtual avatar-based environments are the ones that we're actually onboarding people to right now. And these environments, they have like different levels of intensity, I suppose. So for example, you have browser-based 2D environments where you are a 2D avatar. All you have to use is your arrow keys to move around. It's accessible through your browser, and really easy onboarding. It takes about 1 minute to onboard as soon as you're on there, right? So those are the environments that we actually use the most often because they're the most stable. They allow the most people to be on those platforms at one time because the 2D dual imagery takes up less space on the server than like a 3D space. And so those environments, I think, are probably optimized at this point to some extent, and are the most, I think, recommended to use. And then the next intensity level is browser-based 3D environments. And 3D environments, as you experienced in spatial, you were saying earlier, there's a lot of different things that you can sort of do. And there's a lot of different camera angles. There's a lot of sort of like, it takes a while for you to onboard to that space. And there's also a smaller capacity of people that can be in a space at the same time, right? Then there's a third sort of, intensity, which is non-browser-based 3D environment. So if you're actually downloading something to your computer, that allows a lot more people to be on the platform, but it's not as easily accessible. And then even beyond that is VR based, right? So if you're actually putting on your goggles, you're actually putting on some sort of augmented reality experience, and you're experiencing that in the sort of like very 3D environment of your real life, that's the further intensity. Now, I do research on this a lot, and I experience all these things. I buy all the new stuff and to try to experiment with it. And I haven't found, to be totally honest, any VR goggles that I can spend more than 15 minutes in without being nauseous. Right.
I know.
And so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
reality is like that has so much potential, right? Like we definitely want to get to a place where we can use those goggles to experiment with, looking at beating hearts if you're a science student, or creating models if you're an architect student, things like that. But we're just not there yet. Where the technology is not there yet, where it is, advanced enough that it actually gives you a really positive user experience, and cheap enough so that we can sort of get it out to everybody on the planet. So right now, what we always recommend people to do is, start with your browser-based environments and have people on board onto them, engage with them, create experiences that are totally dynamic and completely different than what you can experience on just sort of like a, video environment, but then slowly experiment to things that are more complex. And by the time that you and your sort of colleagues and your environment is ready for the 3D goggles, hopefully we'll be at a place where people have developed those goggles well enough so that we can spend more time in them and use them in a more optimized way. And hopefully they'll be cheaper so that more people can actually access them.
Yeah, I guess it's with everything in technology. Yeah? So, it becomes cheaper if more people are using this. But yeah, yesterday, for instance, I used my VR glasses, but there are some options that I have with the VR glasses that you don't have on the laptop and vice versa. So I could take a selfie, on spatial with my VR glasses, but I could not. I don't think I can do it with the laptop. And there are things that you can do with the laptop that you cannot do with the VR glasses. So the experience is different. So in my opinion, it's better to configure, to prepare something, with the computer and then visit it with the glasses. But as you say, after 1 hour, the thing on my head gets heavy and it doesn't feel like, comfortable anymore. I prefer to have an avatar because I'm not looking at myself like in a Zoom meeting. It has been proven that people, if you're always looking at yourself, that's not so good for your mental health because you're looking all the time. So that's not ideal. So yeah, I agree with you that there is still some room for improvement. But I think, in Web3, everything goes really fast. But I was also wondering, because if we do a Zoom meeting, often it is recorded. In the metaverse, when presentations or things are happening, is there also an option in your solution to record, and are people doing that?
So again, there are many different platforms that we use. There are a few platforms that do allow in-platform recording and streaming, but most platforms don't allow that. And I think one of the reasons they don't is because every avatar has its own sort of experience. So the video would be of the entire screen. And so that's basically what we do. We do a screen recording, or we use Loom to record, or things like that.
Right. Yeah, for me, it's like I often talk about the metaverse, but obviously for you have different platforms that you have your solution on. So that's something that we don't see all the time because it's either this metaverse or this other metaverse, and you look differently depending on the metaverse where you're going. That's also one of the challenges, of course. Something else that I was wondering, Riti, how do people know about you? Because I guess you are in marketing and you take care of the awareness and people talk about it. But what are some of the campaigns or some of the things that you are doing to make people aware that you exist?
Yeah, I mean, I know I probably have a lot to learn from you on this. I'll probably flip the question to you because I'd love to know like what you've done in the past. But the way that we bring our message to people is through a few different types of campaigns. As you know, content is king. So we try to provide as much content as possible, as much learning content as possible. We do that through a newsletter that I have, which now is the largest newsletter for Web3 and education. And we also do a lot of events, free events that basically help educators and other people understand what Web3 is, especially contextualized for education. And then we also do a few different sort of like campaigns depending on what type of event it is. So one of the things that we tried, which worked really well for the conference that we had back in November, which was a metaverse conference. It was the first metaverse for Web3 and education conference. We actually emailed all of the graduate schools that had education programs for technology. And we specifically said, like, hey, you know, if your students are studying ed tech, if they're getting their PhDs or their masters in ed tech, this is the optimal place for you to be. And it's online, so it's a very low lift. And we emailed a few different graduate schools, and a few of them got back to us. And the largest group that got back to us was Harvard. So Harvard's Graduate School of Education, they actually sent a ton of students that were, you know, studying education into our conference space, and that provided such a great, rich experience. So we try to do a little bit of that too, which is reach out to audiences that we believe are going to find great value out of what we're doing. We never spam. We never send cold emails that are annoying or salesy. We don't, you know, that's sort of not our vibe. We don't want to be sort of like, you know, we don't have a reputation of that. So we're very, very careful about putting out campaigns that are very specifically, you know, value oriented and really provide like a lot of great content to people.
Right.
But you tell me, what has worked for you?
It's as you say, you know, you need to find the way that costs for you the least energy and that you like to do or your team likes to do to create content. Like, for instance, what is working for me, I'm doing this podcast to build my personal brand. And as you know, we just talked a bit, but with most guests, we don't really prepare a lot. I start talking, I start having a nice conversation. So we are talking 20, 30 minutes. And after that, I use this to repurpose it into a blog. As people know, there are social media posts, there is an infographic. I talk about this and I make content that, because we are talking, we are creating content. It doesn't exist somewhere else. With all these new AI tools that are there, you know, Riti, people are just generating content. I generate content that is new, that is fresh. And people like that. They like conversations. They like stories. And for me, this is something that is working. I'm not promoting that. It's just, you know, I put it out, and as you said, you have to, you know, reach your right audience. And something that I learned. So I started my podcast also, you know, without expecting anything. And in the beginning, I was talking to CMOs, and then I said, okay, let's put it a bit larger. I was talking to lots of people in the marketing around a certain subject. For instance, how to use a book for your marketing, how to do video marketing, email marketing, you know, how to use YouTube, for instance, SEO, all these different topics. And then I said, I was suddenly, you know, and the podcast actually that was released before this podcast episode, in that podcast episode, I explained how it happened for me that I went into Web3. And then I started to make podcast episodes around Web3. And I saw that my audience in the beginning was a bit hesitating. What is Yuri now talking about? But now I see a lot of fans that are really coming for my specific stories around Web3 and marketing and everything that's around Web3. In one of the episodes that will be released after this episode, you know, we are talking about the book, in an episode before about decentralized science, some is about decentralized finance. So it's really, for me, inspiring, and I'm passionate by it. Like I see on your side, you are also passionate about what you're doing. So if you can share this, that works, that people like that, instead of just showing another ad or sending a cold DM, you know, message that we receive that all the time. Is that, by the way, something are you doing stuff also for your businesses on social media? Do you use those channels?
Yeah, we definitely do. But before I get to that, I actually wanted to quickly summarize what you just said and pull out 3 particular points that I think are really important to reiterate. One point you made that we also do that's really important that I don't do enough is you really need to recycle your content. So, you know, you had said that you take the podcast and then you turn it into a blog and you turn it into people don't do that enough. People think that they have to create new content all the time, but you really do need to sort of take some really good content that you've produced and put it out in many different ways. The second thing that sort of stuck out to me was the authenticity of it, which is, you know, showing your passion and sort of talking about the things that really make you light up and really make you feel passionate, like those are the things that I think most people will receive well. So that's something that's worked really well for me too, which is, I am constantly talking about Web3 in education and reimagining education, and everything I think about, everything I talk about is through that lens. And so the passion just comes out naturally. I don't have to fake it, right? And then the third thing is the AI, right? So AI is providing so many amazing tools for us and so many opportunities for us to generate content. But I think you made a really good point, which is AI regurgitates the content that's already available on the internet, right? And so it's not producing new content for you. It's simply just, looking at the content that exists and then reformatting it. And I think that we're falling into a little bit of a dangerous space where I'm looking through social media and I can tell which content is generated by AI because it is not new content. It is overly complex. It is overly sophisticated. And it's not, in terms of the language, not the content, sophisticated. And it's not new. It's not like a unique idea. And it's like obviously not generated by a human. So like that's one of the things that I think we need to be really careful of with AI, which is like, don't rely entirely on it if that's like sort of like your main way of getting your message out. In terms of social media, we use LinkedIn and Twitter exclusively, only because we haven't found other platforms to be as fantastic for us. I would say we wanted to get into Facebook a little bit, but Facebook to me feels a little bit outdated. And I know that there's a huge audience on there that we should leverage, but our team just, isn't sort of active on that platform. So it doesn't authentically make sense to us. And then TikTok is something that we actually want to get into. But again, it takes so much time because you have to produce those videos and things like that. The thing that I've learned about LinkedIn recently is, when LinkedIn started, even in the first 10, 15 years, it was not a place where people wanted to be, right? It was not a place where people wanted to socialize. It was a place where people wanted to get jobs, but it wasn't sort of a social media platform. Today, LinkedIn is probably one of the best platforms to put your message out because everybody's a professional there, wanting new opportunities, wanting to learn about new things. Motive for being on LinkedIn is not just to hang out, it's to learn. And so if you're putting out content on LinkedIn, then people will receive it with so much more enthusiasm than they might on another platform like Twitter, where people are there for many different reasons, to have conversations, to troll people, whatever it is, right? And so I've found that LinkedIn has become this sort of like really fantastic place to put out really great content for professionals to consume and to actually be really enthusiastic about.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. LinkedIn, it used to be a platform for people just put their CV on, but now it's way more than that. I say to people, consider your profile not as a CV, what you did in the past, but what you're doing now is important. Consider it as a website, a mini website, so that people visiting your profile, what you are doing. They can connect with you, and then you can have conversations that are, based on content. And, LinkedIn is a platform where most people, let's say, don't put out content. Like it's not like TikTok or Instagram or people are. So if you consider the whole LinkedIn population, I think comparing to other platforms, and people on LinkedIn are not posting so much. And also the platform doesn't really like it. For instance, Instagram likes if you post multiple times a day. LinkedIn doesn't really like that, because if you post 2 times a day on LinkedIn, your first post will get less views. So the algorithm is a bit different. So it's more like quality content on LinkedIn comparing to the other platforms. Also, LinkedIn is, together with TikTok, the social media platform that gives you the most reach organically. If all parameters are the same, that's how it works. And and about repurposing, I also make stuff for TikTok, but then this video I reuse for other short, form platforms like YouTube. I will start. Also, the podcast will be on YouTube, by the way. So it will be also on Instagram, on Facebook, on what now really works. And I must say also, my audience is not really there. It's Facebook Reels. So Facebook Reels, it's something that not so many people put content on Facebook Reels. So it gets views. And that's also for me like, okay, Facebook is now Meta. Meta says they are, they stand for the metaverse, but it's not like people in Web3, are they on Facebook? I don't get the feeling that they do. So it's a bit, yeah. I'm there because I think I need to be there, but my main platforms are also LinkedIn and Twitter. And also, you know, in a few Discord communities, you need to be careful not to be overwhelmed, but there are a few that are really focused on showing up, actually. So, Riti, we talked also a bit about social media, and if people are listening to the podcast and they are interested in everything that you are doing, what are the websites that you would like to send people to? And if there are social media domains that you would like to send to, you can mention them also. We'll put everything in the show notes.
Sure, yeah. So our design studio is k20educators.com. So we design metaverse spaces for learning. And as I said before, we use spatial science and learning science to design the perfect space for the perfect activity. And then our community of educators, our Web3 community of educators, is at ed3dao, ed3dao.com. And then my personal website is vritisaraf.com. And my social media handles are all at vritisaraf.
Wow. Yeah, you have the advantage or disadvantage, depends how you see it, like me, that there is only one person with your name on Earth, I guess, because I never heard. So it's like my name. It's the same.
It's true.
So it's you know, people find you if you know, so if you don't want to get found, they find you, but the other way around, you know, if they need to find you and you want them to find you, they find you. So really, it was really
so funny. You're just like a funny thing about that. So I am the only Vritis Saraf on the internet. So if you Google me, I'll be the first person to show up. And so for the longest time before, you know, I was married, when I went on dating websites and sort of like dating apps, I had to put a fake name because it was so easy for people to find me on the internet that I would start getting messages on LinkedIn from the people that are on the dating websites that like I didn't match with. And so I had to always use a different name. And so for the longest time, I had to sort of like hide my identity. I don't anymore, but that was sort of a fun thing.
Yeah. People also need to know how to write. That's another fun thing because, you know, Yuri, you can write it in in a lot of different ways, you know, and that's also, of course, yeah, it's a funny story to end with, Riti. So thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
So guys, it was again a fun and interesting episode today. So if you like this episode and if you think this can really be useful, interesting for people around me, be sure to share this episode with them. Also be sure to visit Riti's links. You will find them in the show notes. If you are not subscribed yet to our CMO Stories podcast, I think now is the time to hit the subscribe button. And of course, I would like to see you back for the next podcast episode. Bye.